think we're going to move on. Marcus, thanks.
Okay. Thanks very much. Rob, Laurence and I are going to be sharing in this part of the session about a project that we've been working on for the last couple of years, which is to select a digital identity solution for Jersey. And you notice I don't have an American accent. This isn't about New Jersey, but is about a channel island in the English Channel. So for those of you not familiar, you can see Jersey at the bottom of the map there, and alongside it is the coast of Normandy, about 14 miles to the east, and then to the north is the south coast of England, which is about 100 miles away. I'm going to take you back in history for a little bit. If we go back about 1,000 years to the Middle Ages, Jersey was part of Normandy and was governed by Normandy. And then in 1066, William, the Duke of Normandy, invaded England. And he won the Battle of Hastings and became the King of England. So he got Normandy and England. And that was the case for the next 134 years. And then he lost his land in Normandy. And that left Jersey with a decision. Do we stay loyal to the King of England, or do we become part of France? And Jersey decided to be loyal to the King. And as a result, he awarded us various rights, which was including to govern ourselves and to set our own taxes. And so we've taken advantage of that as an island. But it means that we're not English. It was that the king kept Jersey as a peculiarity of the crown, a personal possession of the king, rather than part of England. We're not part of the UK, and we're not part of the European Union. So when it comes to an identity scheme, we are on our own. So this is what Jersey looks like. It's 9 miles by 5. So pretty tiny, really. Lots of farmland, lots of beautiful beaches. And in the south of the island, you can see a grey part of the island there, and that's the town of St Helier, which is only 4 miles square. But in those 4 miles, we have a financial services industry that manages $500 billion of the world's wealth. So of our island population of 100,000 people, 22% of those people are involved in managing that wealth. So the result is that we're a prosperous island with sophisticated needs, hence our desire to build a digital sector alongside our financial sector to help to diversify our economy. We've got quite a lot of things in common with the UK, even though we're not part of it. We have the same British passports, we speak English, we have the same BST time zone, we have the British pound, although we print our own Jersey currency. We've got the same culture as the UK, and one of those cultural elements is that we don't have a national identity card. We have the same banks on the high street. There are some differences too, which any solution needs to take account of. Jersey has some challenges. We have a flat tax take, and we have an aging population. So the government has to be careful on how it spends its resources, and we have engaged in a 5-year program of digital transformation. We're about 4 years into that program now. And as part of the objectives of that transformation program, we identified a digital identity as being a key element. That's what we're focused on delivering here. When we set up a scheme, we've got some broad objectives, one of which is that whatever we do has to be privacy enhancing. And even though we're not part of Europe, the whole world is going to be affected by the GDPR law, and we are creating our own Jersey version of that. We may not be part of Europe, but we're right next to it, and we think it would be important to have compatibility with the EIDAS scheme, so that if somebody is moving to Jersey, for example, from Portugal or Poland, that they can take their identity that they've established in their home country and use it when they come to Jersey. We've not got the capacity to build and run a scheme entirely ourselves. What we really want to do is to have an identity as a service solution. We would like to scale up the cost of the scheme as the adoption increases, rather than have all the costs up front. We would like it to be an end-to-end solution. So we've got a verification challenge because we don't have national identity cards today. We need to establish who the citizen is. So we need an identity provider or multiple identity providers. We may need a hub, and we need to connect up that system to our relying parties. In terms of level of assurance, the focus initially will be at level 2, but we also have need for LOA 1 and LOA 3. So that's a broad background. So I'm going to hand over to Rob, and Rob is going to explain what we've done in the project so far.
Right, thank you, Marcus. So, because of the similarities between the Jersey and the UK, similar set of requirements and design principles, the obvious starting point for us was to have a look at the gov.uk verified scheme and evaluate it in the context of Jersey. So we undertook 2 projects with OIX and with the collaboration of some of the existing Verify identity providers. And the first of these was a discovery project to understand whether, in theory, the Verify model could be adapted for Jersey. And that highlighted some areas that we should investigate further. So we undertook an alpha project in 3 areas. And these areas were around the user engagement. How would residents and citizens of Jersey engage with a digital identity model? The second, we started to look at the identity proofing process, and within Verify there are a number of trusted data sources that are used for identity proofing. And the third element was, could we build a hub that replicated the functionality of the Verify hub? And our findings from this are as follows. So with those 3 key elements, we looked at let's take the identity proofing process. And in the UK, with gov.uk Verify, the IDPs have a reliance on financial information that comes from credit reference agencies, as well as other data sources, government data sources and the like. And what we found through this investigation was there was a lot less credit information available for the residents of Jersey than existed in the UK. And therefore, we'd have to find an alternative approach. And one of those ideas we have was to look at other government data sources that might reflect people's financial history and activity. and one of those being tax returns, for instance, as a demonstration of people's income rather than their spend. So we'll look further at that, but the consideration is we could use income rather than expenditure as a way of proving people's financial footholds. In terms of user engagement, findings there were that and perhaps not surprising, that the residents of Jersey had very similar views to those in the UK. And in the UK, extensive research has been done over 3 years in terms of that user engagement. And what we found out was we could actually utilise that research and use those findings really as we move forward if we went forward with this type of approach. The third area was hub technology, and that was a little bit more problematical. Verify hub was built really 4 years ago and has moved on, evolved, but where the world was 3 or 4 years ago isn't where it is now. And so they started from scratch. They built it using the standards and protocols available at the time, mostly SAML profiles, and we didn't want to start from that point. There's no point in rebuilding something that had already existed, and an option isn't just to take the gov.uk Verify hub and drop it into Jersey. So we, in partnership with Microsoft, took the Azure B2C identity service as a platform in a pre-production version and a preview version. So effectively became a beta build, and took longer than we expected, but we got there, and we actually built something using that replicated the functionality. In all this, though, the bottom line is how much is it going to cost, and will a service that scale for 50 million people in the UK be appropriate and cost effective for an island of 100,000 residents? And that question still hasn't been answered. So as we moved on, we looked at other models. So what was happening worldwide? And those are all names that, services, systems and schemes that you'll be familiar with. But what was evident from these and the research we did was that different schemes start in different places, and their design was very much influenced by factors like 20th century history, culture, political system, local legislation, whether an ID card existed or not, whether the scheme was started by the banking industry, or was it started by government. And what this all meant for us was that it became pretty obvious that they weren't in a sort of production state that meant they could be lifted and dropped into Jersey. And so although we might be able to take different models and look at what might be appropriate, be it in the UK, be it Estonia, be it elsewhere, actually we'd probably end up having to build something pretty much from scratch anyway. We also considered the technical standards used. And as mentioned, Verify was built really around SAML. That was the standard adopted. And lots of things have happened, as you know, in the last 3 years. So we have OpenID Connect now, and that's what we adopted within this pilot. UMA's come around, that didn't exist 3 years ago. It was an idea. Now it's coming close to reality, and that's going to be an important development as well as we move forward in terms of going beyond just identities and looking at the sharing of data as well. We built a little model, so what we call these sort of identity market analysis, and we've used the standard PESTLE sort of charts. So looking at how the political, economic, social, technological, and legal issues and developments are affecting the identity space. And we added a line to the top, which is the I line, the identity line, and tried to sort of take an estimate on where identity is going to be in, say, 2 years, in 5 years, in 10 years. And I think we have no doubt, and I think everybody's of a like mind, and the question that Steve raised just now illustrated that. We're a long way from achieving that top right-hand box, which is where we might have a digital identity that can be used globally, much as we would, a Visa card or even a mobile phone with that level of interoperability. Will we ever see that in the next generation? That might be questionable. But for Jersey, it can't wait for this to happen. It's got to move on. It needs something over the course of the next year or so in place. It needs to. This is a foundational piece to digital transformation, which is where it's got to get, and many other governments have got to get as well. And what's crucial about that is and that cost issue is they've got to start looking at how products come to market now to address this. And we're starting to see the first signs of products emerge in very much in their infancy, but address this issue of digital identity. It has to be a sort of productized cost. And so Jersey is going to, rather than look too deeply anymore, it's going to throw it open to the market and let the market come to Jersey with what it can offer. And as such, it will be sort of in the early stages of a procurement process that will be kicking off later this year. And there's a couple of links. There's more information on the OX white papers. There's plenty of blogs to look at, which have come from Marcus and his team about digital identity and about digital transformation in Jersey. So if there is an interest in that, or people who might be interested, then please get in touch with Jersey through the link chain. So thank you for that. And quite happy if there are any questions, we can take those. We have a little bit of time, I think.
Any questions for Rob or Marcus?
Thanks. I'll just make a small comment about RealMe. I mean, my sense was, I can understand why you wouldn't lift up RealMe and put it into Jersey, but in fact, it's actually very capable of doing that, but it's based on SAML. So it's absolutely production ready. It's been going since 2007. So from that perspective, I think maybe it was a gross generalisation, but I take your point that if you are going to, you're going to work with a new set of protocols, then you wouldn't actually take, a service that's basically, based on old ones. But just a refining, perhaps, Rob.
And I think that's there's an important point that comes from that, is because wherever we start, it's always going to move on. The world's going to move on, and new standards and protocols are emerging all the time, and where will that start to tail off and we actually develop with what we've got? There is a danger, you fall into this, it's something as important as digital identity, which is maybe, will last a lifetime. You don't want to be replacing your schemes every few years as new technology comes along, new devices come along even.
Yeah, I think I'd add to that taking another nation's scheme, the question becomes who would we contract with, who would implement the system, and what incentive would there be for the original nation to see its system reused. And we explored that at length with gov.uk verify to where there was an intention from the outset that the model would be reused. So that was an obvious one. It was then you take somewhere like Estonia, for example, they're very keen to see other nations adopt their model. It was less clear with some of the other countries as to how we would go about reusing the model.
Firstly, thank you, Colin, for supporting RealMe. Internal Affairs New Zealand, RealMe Business Development Manager. Emma in the corner there will be catching up after this, no doubt. I agree, there's a couple of things, again, you said about RealMe regarding taking on models, but I'm particularly keen to find out a little bit more around what you think about bringing providers into the market going forward to support the New Jersey model, and how you can make that go on a little bit more effectively in the future. More a statement than a question.
Yeah, I think generally that this is the reason why we're here, is to start this conversation, and I would be very excited if there was amongst the audience somebody's going, yep, I can imagine that we've got the solution to this. In which case, then please let's start that conversation.
I think to add to that, sorry, just before we come in, bit of research we did. There's I heard a figure the other day that said that 80% of nations around the world are looking at digital identity. 25% of nations have a population less than 1 million. So I would have thought there's a kind of opportunity there to be filled.
add to that you saw on the map that right next to Jersey is our sister island of Guernsey, and that's also an independent island. We don't share the same government, so they've got similar needs, although albeit they're even smaller than we are as a population. And then further to the north in the Irish Sea, there's the Isle of Man, and they've got a requirement as well. So the three islands have been talking and working together. So if somebody was to productize a solution for Jersey, then there's instant ability to replicate it elsewhere. And I think then that's just the start, whether it's the Caribbean islands or lots of other smaller communities that don't have the means at the moment to build their own solution.
You mentioned you did a POC with Azure, Azure AD B2C. I was curious what came out of it. What were your learnings? Is there a pilot?
Yeah, and we actually completed that work in the last couple of weeks. I think the learnings, I'd rather defer that. We're going to publish a white paper on the project on the OX website, and I'm hopeful that'll be out within sort of a couple of weeks now. So rather than sort of try and preempt some of that thing, I'd rather you sort of let the white paper come and give you the full background to that. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Yep.
Oh, sorry.
Sounds like a very interesting project. I guess we built MyGov ID in Ireland I'm a consultant, so I'm not with the government, just to be very clear, but we were part of the team that built MyGov ID, which is a very similar challenge to yourselves, not a very large population. A lot of the speakers we've heard have bigger consumers than we have population in Ireland. So I guess I'm interested to understand the separation of your digital identity and your identity proofing. And you mentioned checking people's tax, and P60 would be determined in Ireland around how much tax they paid as a way of identity proofing. What other things are you thinking about in the identity proofing space? Because we would have a similar challenge where not everyone has the data in the same place, and we have to have various different schemes to get the identity proofing levels up. So I'm kind of interested to hear in Jersey what you're thinking in that space.
So one of the limitations, or one of the issues that have been around the Gov.uk Verify scheme is the number of people that are getting through the gate with online identity proofing. So we're seeing numbers down as low as sort of mid-40s% people actually successfully getting through the journey and being able to use their credential in a follow-on service. So we started from the perspective of looking at the standard, which is the GPT 45, Good Practice Guide 45, which is what the IDPs use for the proofing process, and looked at the parallels with Jersey. Now, Jersey's got maybe a slightly different demographic mix of people anyway, and it's got a lot of foreign nationals in as well. So we've kind of done a side-by-side comparison. So government-issued documentations as passports and driving licenses and so on, but looking at the shortfalls in other areas like financial information with what could be provided in government. And those government data sources are maybe I should say they're a better quality than what exists in the UK. I don't want to put words into that I shouldn't be saying out of turn, but the reason that I believe that government in the UK doesn't want to use its own sources is because the quality can't be relied on, and that's the case often in other governments. But there has been a lot of research and analysis done of the Jersey data sources in government, and the feeling is that they are much better quality and fit for purpose, so hence the reason we're just looking at alternatives. Where we go beyond that and looking at different methods of identity proofing, we haven't really gone there yet. And I think that's a problem that exists. Face-to-face is out of the question. It becomes too expensive even for 100,000 people. So we've got to look at how we can do that online. And the target would be to get somewhere near 90% of people through that door.
One last question.
Are you looking at this only for adults working or kids as well? I mean, what age are you?
That's a very good question. The voting age in Jersey is 16, and there's an ambition to allow people to register to vote online and then eventually to be able to place their votes online in a future project. I think that if the election is coming up and you haven't quite turned 16 yet, you can register to vote at age 15 and 3/4. So we would like to be able to include those age groups, but that's going to be particularly difficult with some of the different means of verification that we're looking at. That's in scope, but we haven't got a solution yet.
Great. Marcus Raab, thank you so much for the presentation. We're going to quickly set up for Joni here in a second.